I'd like to continue our Board of Supervisors meeting to our evening session at 7 o'clock. First order of business is public comments. I don't have anyone signed up ahead of time for our public comment opportunity. Is there anyone present that wants to speak at public comments? If no one wants to speak to public comments, I'll just open and close and go on to the next order of business, which is a public hearing. We have two items for public hearing. The first one is Ordinance 0-2025-04, Amendment to Chapter 11, Taxation, Article 6, Transient Occupancy Tax. Candy, you may lead us through this.
Thank you. So this is a public hearing on an ordinance 0-2025-04, amendment to Chapter 11, Taxation, Article 6, Transient Occupancy Tax, and our state code authorization for this amendment is pursuant to enacted General Assembly Bills HB 2383 and SB 1402 that became effective July 1st, 2025. So State Code Title 58.1, Taxation, Subtitle 3, Local Taxes, Chapter 38, Miscellaneous Taxes, Article 6, Transient Occupancy Tax, and more specifically, Sections 58.1, 3818.8, Definitions, 58.1, 3826, Scope of Transient Occupancy Tax, and 58.1, 3827, Administration of Transient Occupancy Tax. Section 58.1, 3818.8 also references Section 58.1-602 definitions. So this amendment would add definitions to the county code, Section 11-130, definitions pursuant to Section 58.1-602. We're adding definitions for accommodations, accommodations fee, accommodations intermediary, and accommodations provider. The amendment would also repeal current section 11-132 and enact new section 11-132, collection from transients when payable pursuant to 58.1-3826, scope of transient occupancy tax. This amendment provides for collection of tax by accommodations intermediaries and accommodations providers. It also provides for reporting and remittance of tax by accommodations intermediaries and accommodations providers. It would also add to County Code Section 11-133, report of collection and remittance of tax pursuant to 58.1-3827, administration of transient occupancy tax. It adds the following: accommodations providers are not required to submit a report to the Commissioner of Revenue if all accommodation sales are facilitated by an accommodations intermediary and the provider attests to the locality by a Commissioner of Revenue form stating the same. It provides for when the attestation forms must be provided to the Commissioner of Revenue, and also accommodations providers who do not use an accommodations intermediary are required to submit a report and remit such tax as otherwise required in Article 6. So basically, we're amending our ordinance to comply with new state law effective July 1st, 2025, as previously described. So next steps would be conduct a public hearing, ask and answer any questions, and then staff would recommend adoption of the ordinance as presented.
Okay. Thank you, Candy. So we'll proceed with the public hearing and maybe get back with you. See how we go. Okay. So I didn't have anyone that had signed up for the public hearing, but quickly for the people that are here, at the public hearing you have 3 minutes to speak. Please give your name and address and address the board in the 3 minutes. Please be civil and tell us what's on your mind, but only speak to the ordinance which we are having the public hearing for. I'll close public hearing after that. And, I forgot to mention, if you are representing a group, identify the group, and you can be given up to 5 minutes in that case. So I open the public hearing for ordinance 0-2025-04, the amendment to Chapter 11, Taxation, Article 6, Transient Occupancy Tax. And does anyone like to speak at this public hearing on this matter? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and turn it over to the board. Do you have any questions for Candy concerning this ordinance? If not, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve ordinance 2025-04.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. If there's no further discussion, we'll do roll call.
Dr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Farr?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes. Okay, thank you, board. Next, we have Candy's introduction to our next public hearing for ordinance 0-2025-5, the amendment to Chapter 6, Licenses, Permits, and Business Regulations, Article 4, General Business License.
Okay, thank you. All right, the authorizing state code section pursuant to enacted General Assembly Bills HB 2383 and SB 1402, effective July 1st, 2025, would amend Title 58.1 Taxation, Chapter 0, General Provisions, Article 1 in general, and specifically Section 58.1-3, Secrecy of Information and Penalties, Section G. So pursuant to the state code section, the new legislation says information provided by an accommodations intermediary to commissioners of revenue or treasurers for transient occupancy tax purposes shall be confidential and cannot be shared with any other department or official of the locality. This in itself has some procedural implications for the county because currently the Commissioner of Revenue submits copies of the business licenses for each month to planning and zoning staff to confirm zoning ordinance compliance, and these are also provided to tourism and economic development in maintaining the county's business registry. This will no longer be allowed pursuant to the new state code provisions for those businesses whose information is provided by an accommodations intermediary. In order to address this change, county staff proposes a solution that amends the county code, Chapter 6, License, Permits, and Business Regulations, Article 4, General Business License, Section 6-90, Application Requirements. The proposed county code amendment would repeal and reenact the current Section 6-90, Application Requirements, adding the requirement of obtaining zoning approval prior to the issuance of a business license for new or existing businesses, which have changed physical location or description. This would only apply to uses regulated by the zoning ordinance, such as commercial uses, home occupations, and short-term rentals. Planning and zoning is developing a new zoning approval application to ensure the necessary information is captured and that the use is compliant prior to the applicant acquiring a business license from the Commissioner of Revenue. Okay, so next steps would be to conduct a public hearing, question and answers, and then staff certainly recommends adoption of this ordinance so that we may obtain information directly through the Planning and Zoning Office, and then we would share it with the Commissioner's Office when someone applies for a business license as described therein.
Okay. Thank you, Candy. So I'm going to open the public hearing on ordinance 0-2025-05, amendment to Chapter 6, Licenses, Permits, and Business Regulations, Article 4, General Business License. Open the public hearing. Anyone here like to speak to this ordinance?
Okay, we just want to ask a question.
You can come and say what's on your mind. We do not have dialogue during this time. If you have issues that you would like clarified, it's possible that we may, discuss that, or perhaps we will ask Candy to address them.
Just come up and say what you got, and we'll ask staff the question later.
Well, it's just saying.
Yeah,
Could come up and give
say
you.
it, and then after the public hearing's over with, we'll ask staff.
Thank you, Jesse.
No problem.
Tracy Coffee. The question that a whole bunch of us was making sure of is, when it says that it's gonna make amendments to previous existing business, like, like myself.
Yes.
So that means we have to go through and apply for a new permit every single time, and then we may or may not? Or, like, what exactly is this the objective to this?
Yeah, we'll talk about that as soon as we get to the Q&A. I know
Okay.
exactly what you're asking about.
Okay, all right.
No.
Okay. Ms. Coffey, did you give your address? I'm sorry, I was,
Tower, 550 Coffee Hall Lane.
thank you. Okay, anyone else like to speak to this public hearing? If not, I'll close the public hearing. And Candy, I think we'll have some questions for you.
So to clarify, as it relates to obviously with business licenses, we have to file those yearly on an annual basis and be approved by the current zoning department or Commissioner of Revenue. With the change of the process in this secrecy code, as a result of that new piece of legislation, we now have to have it go before zoning to us to get approved. Is that correct? I believe the answer is yes.
I believe it's yes, but I just wanted to make sure,
And you would,
it would happen prior to the issuance of the business license for new or existing businesses which have changed physical location or description.
gotcha. So an existing business license, we would not necessarily have to do this again. But
Right.
going forward, if I were to start a new business and or short-term rental, this would apply to.
Yes.
Or change the address.
Or if you
Right.
change your address.
Yes.
So and now, as it relates to what this means for short-term rentals, this isn't a zoning related item in terms of
No.
where all that's still the by right. This mechanism exists purely because we as a county no longer have the access to the information that we utilize
Right.
to enforce the current ordinance and taxation.
Yeah, it's about managing the flow of information because we can no longer get
Right.
short-term rental information from the commissioner's office if
Right.
accommodations intermediary provides it. So now we're trying to get it on the county side and then, through zoning, and then they go get their business license.
Right.
So we're collecting it up front
Sure.
versus getting it from the commissioner as we've previously done.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah. Now, I understand that. However, the word permit doesn't really come up in this. Would it be accurate to say that this is a permit required to be completed with zoning before I do this? Would it be accurate to say that? Because if we're talking to people, it might be, if it is actually a permit, then if we just say, oh, it's just a permit, but there's, it's just a formality.
So it's a formality, it's completion of a form
Okay.
with planning and zoning. The
Okay.
actual permit
Okay.
still comes from the commissioner of
Gotcha.
Revenue's office.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
And it's information that we're already getting in a different form.
correct.
Right.
Yes. And
Okay.
to me, it makes better sense for planning and zoning to, sign off on it saying, yes, this is an allowed use in
R1.
In the
this
beginning.
zoning district to begin with, before they go get a business license for something they can't legally do,
Right.
so.
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay, any more questions? Okay, thank you, Candy. Board, what's your pleasure on this? Someone like to?
I move we adopt ordinance O 2025-05, Nelson County Board of Supervisors, amendment to the Code of the Nelson County of Virginia, Chapter 6, Licenses, Permits, and the Business Regulations, Article 4, General Business License.
Okay, we have a
Second.
Okay. Mr. Parr seconds. Any further discussion? Then let us have a roll call.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes.
Dr. Lagan?
Yes.
Mr. Parr?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Candy. Now we have a presentation on the Charlottesville Albemarle Regional Jail renovation. The project scope update, we have Colonel Coomer to speak to that, and then we also have a financing update from Roland Cooch Davenport, which will follow.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, by the way, for accommodating my schedule and moving this to this evening, by the way. Make sure I get this right there. So we came here last year, asked for interim finance in order to design the renovation itself and the expansion. When I say expansion, by the way, remind you, we're not adding any new beds, it's expanding the square footage. So we got our bids in late May, and as you can see, they came in significantly over what we were expecting. We were anticipating in February, our last estimate would be somewhere around $39 million for the actual hard construction, not the design and engineering cost, but the actual hard construction. As you can see, the bids came in from $53 million was the lowest bidder, as the English construction went up to $76 million. We believe a lot of that was due to some of the tariffs, to the unknown cost of what material is going to be 2 years from now. But this thing is a lot more materials we needed, not so much in the front end. A lot of unknowns out there. There was some creep in the scope of work as well. They kind of bumped that up a little bit. So what we decided was to work within the initial budget that we were all expecting, which was the $39.9 million for actual hard construction cost, and kind of bring the scope in line with what we all hoped it would be. So what I'm gonna go with you now is what we've come up with over the last several weeks. So it was basically designed in two phases. An expansion of the 1975 portion, or excuse me, yes, an expansion of the 1975 portion, and then a renovation of the 1974 portion. So one section is kind of shaped like an H. I think everyone's here been on a tour. It's kind of shaped like an H. Well, one leg is right in the middle of the jail, and we can't really tear that down. So we were just going to renovate that to the best of our ability. Another part is kind of on the outside, and we're going to be able to tear that down and rebuild it to meet all of the building codes and meet most of the jail's needs. So what we decided to do in order to meet the budget was forego the expansion, or excuse me, forego the renovation portion and focus on the expansion, which is this section here. So this is all, for the most part, 1974, and this did not receive any significant renovations since 1974. In 2000, that far section in the upper left-hand corner, that was added, and the whole jail was supposed to be renovated. However, that contract went bankrupt about halfway through, and with what funds were left, they finished the expansion portion, added the new beds, and did some light renovations to this facility, but they did not touch this far in. So we decided this would be the one in most need of renovation, and we can do without it for a while. It has no food service, no medical service, no boilers, no major electrical components from that side. That can be torn down. We can house those inmates with another side of the jail. Contracts can have that. No big impact on security, no impact on services or staff. When they're done, to let us know, we move back into this side. So that's why we chose to continue with this. So that is what it will look like once that old portion is torn down and that's the expansion. It'll be a two-story. So there's one story, two-story, and that's how we get the expansion piece. It goes from 16,000 square feet to 32,000 square feet. The original scope of the expansion, again, 16,000 square feet will be raised, demolished, 32,000 square feet will be added in its place, new dedicated public entrance, 12 new individual family and friends professional visitation. Expansion will include 65 single beds designed to meet the 2018 Board of Corrections standards. And they will all also be ADA accessible. Those 65 beds are being torn down and are being rebuilt. So again, we're not adding any new beds here. This area will also include 3 new outdoor recreation areas, one attached to each of the 3 new housing units. The expansion will also have video court space with holding areas for defendants, 2 mental health offices with group therapy rooms, 2 additional mental health community provider rooms, 2 purpose-built mental health housing areas with a total of 14 beds, 1 large inmate classroom, 14 additional office spaces for staff, and it will also all be designed with trauma-informed design. Now, what's not in there, this is what I was talking about earlier with the renovation. The portion you see there got some attention back in 2000, not what was intended, but quite more, actually more than nothing is what this section got. We're going to renovate and reconfigure approximately 40,000 square feet. Take out all the bar grate from the 1970s, replace all the exterior windows, replace all existing and additional toilets, to meet the 2018 standards, add one additional outdoor recreation area, replace all lighting, HVAC, and plumbing, and improve ADA accessibility. That's what was originally planned in the renovation. However, the phase 2 portion, I just went that a second ago. So what will still happen in the renovation, there will still be some things that will be done. We're gonna focus primarily on the HVAC. The bar grate will remain, the original lighting will remain, the toilets will remain. We will not be adding any new toilets this time. Pretty much focus solely on HVAC in that old 1974 section. The total cost, hard cost and soft cost, was $49,227,000. Again, the hard cost of 39.9. The rest is all the soft costs, all the engineering, all the architectural. There's no overall change in total project cost. The General Assembly has already approved $11.9 billion reimbursement, and that will stay the same. We've already been in touch with the Board of Local Regional Jails. That will not, this change in scope will not impact the 25% reimbursement. That is safe. And the project is still estimated to begin in 2025 and take approximately 28 months. I'm going to show you some pictures now. That's the new expansion area. That's the side you see from Avon Street. The cars parked there in front of the actual magistrate's office. That was some of the expansion of the scope creep that I talked about. A law was passed on July 1st that required separate secure parking for the magistrates and a separate secure entrance. So we rolled that into this expansion project. That was not originally included, but since it is law, we are required to do that once we start touching it. It is included. Here's another view. That again is the expansion. The new public lobby. In your lower left corner is the current public lobby. You see there's no seating for anyone. This is one of the new housing areas. This is actually a special management unit. Your lower left-hand corner is a picture of the current 1974 special management unit that was never remodeled or renovated in any way. This is a cell now. They're almost twice as big per code. The cell at the bottom left actually housed 2 inmates. This one's almost twice as big. We only house 1 individual. This is not colorized, by the way. This is just a black and white screen. The paint scheme will be different. This is a mental health unit. One of the classrooms upstairs, one additional classroom will be added to the expansion portion. And again, a nighttime view of the expansion. Are there any questions about the scope, what it was, how it came to be?
You know, I'll just speak to the unfortunate situation related to what our hopes and dreams were a couple years ago and trying to get ourselves into a position of getting really caught up. But unfortunately, the economics of it have limited to our capacity, which is a shame. But nonetheless, this is a major step in the right direction in making sure that we're providing adequate jailing services for folks. And I've got to admit, you know, across the Commonwealth, I will continue to make this speech that our jail system that we are part of is probably one of the best in the Commonwealth. And, you know, people who have mental health issues and they're in these crises are getting access to that in ways that a lot of other jails don't. And so we have a lot to be thankful for being part of this, to cooperate with all law enforcement, which is always a good message to send out. And this is a much needed situation. And I think for our constituents who may be listening who are in the room, we obviously are not the only locality footing this bill. We share this amongst ourselves, Albemarle and Charlottesville. So we aren't footing the entire bill, and this is based on an average daily membership. So if we have a lot more of the percentage of the average daily membership, there's some yearly costs that increase for us, but that's on a 5-year average, I think is what staff indicated today. So, you know, it's a necessary thing for us to do.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Colonel?
I'll
Okay.
make a motion when we're ready. Or we have to do the public hearing.
We got to do,
Public hearing.
yeah, so thank you. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And
Money.
Mr. Cooch, now we'll talk about the money part.
Sounds good. Thank you, Chairman Reed, and members of the board. It's loaded up.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
just want to clarify, this is not a public hearing.
Correct.
This is not a public
Correct.
one.
So I'm here to update you on the plan of finance. We were here earlier this year to talk about the original, sort of the initial presentation on the plan of finance. We stand now today to talk about the evolution of it as it is unfolded. Give you an update on that in connection with Colonel Coomer's update on the bidding process and actually how the project is going to unfold. This presentation, I'll discuss a couple of the new developments as they've proceeded here this summer, and in anticipation of the board's consideration of the resolution for the support agreements this evening. Just as a background here, we are here in our capacity. We also work with the county as financial advisor, but we're here in the capacity as financial advisor to the Regional Jail Authority tonight to talk about the jail funding process, kind of a refresher and reminder of that approach. Review of the two-part plan of finance. We're officially in the second part of this plan of finance now, with what we're undertaking now for the permanent financing, as well as the grant anticipation note. And both of those pieces are in the second part of the plan of finance that I'll be talking about. And again, going through the timetable and where we stand with respect to the funding. And then lastly, the budgetary estimated cash flow impact. You're going to see some projected numbers in here that are shown on a conservative basis. We anticipate the final financing based on where current markets are to be better than what you see in the presentation tonight. The jail funding process, just as a reminder here, regional jails are eligible for 25% reimbursement of eligible costs for eligible capital portions of the construction project, major capital projects. The authority has gone through the process of deciding to undertake this project. It did what it needed to do with respect to fulfilling requirements with the DOC, undertaking a community-based corrections plan and planning study to develop that cost estimate. And then following the approval by the Board of Local and Regional Jails, the request for the 25% reimbursement was put into the General Assembly and inclusion in the governor's budget some time ago, a couple years ago in that respect. After the approval of the 25% reimbursement, it was set aside by the Commonwealth. So that money is waiting there for the completion of this project. The reimbursement amount of that 25% is in the budget to the tune of about $11.7 million. That's the exact figure there. It was included in the governor's budget in the spring of '23. What is also reimbursed by the Commonwealth is a little bit of cost to carry on that note. So we anticipate that note based on our calculations to be somewhere around $12,250,000, probably not to exceed $12,500,000 in that range. It's going to depend on a variety of factors as we come to finalizing the numbers here the next couple of weeks. The two-part plan of finance that we're talking about here is typically undertaken after the approval. So we're definitely in this process after the approval of the Commonwealth's 25%. So we're currently underway in sort of dotting the I's and crossing the T's and really finalizing the numbers here at this point. The two parts that I referenced and are talking about really consisted of part one, which was the interim financing, and we came to the county a couple of years ago to undertake a 2023 bond anticipation note. That was an amount that was designed to provide interim financing for only what was necessary to complete preliminary design and go through the engineering and bidding of this. And that note was an amount of not to exceed $4.5 million. Currently, the amounts drawn on that to date are about $3.3 million in that respect. That interim financing is and has always been intended to be repaid by part two. So we're not adding on top of that $4.5 million. That's actually included in part two. We're just going to permanently finance those costs with basically a permanent financing through Virginia Resources Authority as well as a grant anticipation note to front the money for the Commonwealth's reimbursement. So right now, in the highlighted box, we are in part 2 of the financing. At this point, we know what the bids are and how the project has been descoped and kind of worked to meet the total overall budget of $49.3 million. That's what's going to be funded with this part 2. And then part of that was originally, a component of that was partially interim financed in part 1. That's going to be rolled into part 2. Net net, your overall budget is still going to be $49.3 million. So we're not adding to or increasing that number. With this part 2 of the financing, as I've said, we're looking at permanent financing through Virginia Resources Authority, as well as undertaking a grant anticipation note to fund the Commonwealth's portion of its costs. The ultimate repayment of this grant anticipation note would be repaid prior to maturity from the Commonwealth once the jail is completed and construction is complete and the appropriate forms and proof of compliance with all the construction is submitted to the Department of Corrections. So with respect to part 1, this again closed in the December of 2023. This was an amount up to $4.5 million, and we did at that time obtain a bond anticipation note with respect to those costs at roughly about 4.49%. So that is going to be repaid with this permanent financing through VRA here in the next several weeks as we as VRA issues those bonds, and then we'll then look to repay that portion off. Part 2, we've got 2 pieces here, the permanent financing and the grant anticipation note. And again, that grant anticipation note is an interim financing that's anticipated to be an amount equal to at least the Commonwealth's reimbursement, plus a little bit of interest carry that they're going to be responsible for as well. We're working with the Treasury to size that based on the actual cost of funds that we anticipate getting on this grant anticipation note. The permanent bonds, again, those are the Virginia Resources Authority bonds. Whatever is not financed by the grant anticipation note is going to be permanently funded with those bonds. And we've got sources and uses in the back so you can see how that works in terms of that. So you can roughly think about $12 million is funded by the grant anticipation note. Rounded, about $37 million is going to be funded from the permanent bonds. Together, that totals to about the $49 million total project cost. The 2025 GAN will be repaid again with grant monies received in full by the Commonwealth, and the 2025 bonds will be the permanent debt service that will be responsible for, that the local jurisdictions will be responsible for pursuant to their proportionate shares. An overview of the permanent financing. Effectively, when we looked at this earlier on, there was 3 basic opportunities to seek permanent financing. The first being a direct bank loan via our request for proposals process. That really didn't apply or didn't really suit what we were looking for in terms of structure. We're looking at a 25-year amortization. Direct bank loans typically go out no longer than 20 years. So that left us with options basically in the middle of the page of public market issuance, basically authority standalone. That is to say, the authority itself would go out, get a public bond rating, potentially issue the bonds on its own. But then when we compared that to Virginia Resources Authority is a very suitable conduit and a very advantageous conduit for authorities like Albemarle, Kent, Charlottesville Regional Jail Authority, because it allows us access to essentially AA plus, almost near AAA bond rates, without having to get a standalone rating by the authority, nor without having each one of the localities to get a standalone rating. We do know that Charlottesville and Albemarle do have their own ratings, have always had that, but it didn't require Nelson County to get a separate standalone rating. So we recommended that due to the ability to achieve the lowest cost of funds amongst this without going through a separate rating process, and that would require potentially additional costs. The VRA option was the most advantageous to proceed with, and we're in that process right now. Typically, the structure of that transaction is going to look identical to the transaction that the authority could potentially get by itself. Standard 10-year no call. That means you cannot prepay within the first 10 years. And there's really no additional owner's reserve requirements that we would have as well. With respect to the grant anticipation notes, there really are two options here. A direct bank loan via an RFP process. That is the authority doing this by itself and actually issuing the note. Or a direct bank loan with VRA kind of assisting the authority. We actually undertook the first approach because we're an authority that's very strong. It's got two AAA member jurisdictions, so very good solid credit. Nelson County, even though not rated, is a very strong credit as well in terms of its metrics. So we thought the first option without the additional kind of VRA costs associated with it would be the best approach. And we did actually get and receive 4 bids, 4 bids under that approach as well. We're going to present those to the authority this week on the 10th for the authority's consideration. With respect to key assumptions in terms of planning rates, the numbers that you see in here tonight are based on what we're calling these planning rates. We're assuming that the grant anticipation note is about $12.1 million, the planning interest rate of 5%, and again, we're looking at about 3 years, a little bit of extra time after the construction period to allow for the shakedown of the facility, the completion of paperwork and requisitions to the Department of Corrections in order to pay off that grant anticipation note. Gives us a little bit of time there. I wanted to let you know that planning rate is we're going to do better than that on the actual bank proposals. So that being said, when we look at the 2025 bonds that are anticipated to be issued through Virginia Resources Authority, again, that's roughly estimated about $37 million. The estimated interest rate that you see in here tonight is about just under 5%. That represents current market rates as of April 30th, plus about 50 basis points, or about 0.5%. Just to let you know, in today's market, we're right under about 450. So we're actually about 50 basis points better than the rates you see here. And then that's going to result in slightly less debt service than you see in here as well. The structure is about a 28-year final term, approximately 2 to 3 years interest in that range, followed by 25 years of level debt service. So your principal is being repaid over 25 years after construction is complete. The allocation of the debt service, again, for purposes of presentation tonight, is based on the FY 2026 allocations in the budget. Albemarle at about 44%, Charlottesville at about 39.5%, and Nelson County at about 16.3%. So the timetable for the bonds and the grant anticipation note in 2025, again, we presented this plan of finance earlier this year in March. Looking at that, based on that presentation, we undertook a lot of work to submit the application to prepare for the summer pool. At the same time, the authority went through the bidding process and finalized its bidding and de-scoping work to arrive at a project within the budget. We did meet the application deadlines, and the authority went through the construction bids. On or about June 2 through June 10, we're originally supposed to come to the local member jurisdictions for consideration of the support agreement, but that was postponed until after the authority went through its de-scoping and process to confirm that the project could fit within the original budget. But the authority did undertake an approval of its resolution prior to the VRA deadline, which was June 12th, to hold its place in the summer pool. So where we stand tonight, the approval of this resolution, consideration of the support agreements is the last one to be undertaken. Charlottesville and Albemarle already approved theirs. So once we approve this, we're in good shape to do both the grant anticipation note as well as the VRA bonds. So what we did to balance this out, we undertook an RFP process, as I mentioned earlier in the meeting here, to seek potential grant anticipation note providers. We have those bids back, and we're going to present those to the authority board on July 10th for its consideration to proceed forward with the grant anticipation note. Based on that, we're going to size and work with VRA and the bond sale to size exactly what we anticipate and project to receive back from the Commonwealth in terms of repaying that note off. And then we anticipate closing on the grant anticipation note during the week of July 21st, and VRA is going to close on its bonds the week of August 4th. At that point in time, the authority will have all of its money ready to go for the construction of the jail project. So looking at what this debt service on both the note as well as the bonds is projected to look like, and again, this is based on the planning rates in here as well as the VRA estimated cost of funds at about 0.5% higher than what you see, than what we currently expect to receive based on today's market. So ultimately, when you look at the debt service from fiscal year 26 all the way through 28, that's the construction period. And that is designed to be interest only. And you see the interest on the grant anticipation note in the first column. You don't see principal repayment there because effectively what's going to happen is the Commonwealth's going to come and extinguish the principal component of that. So the authority is responsible just for the interest payment on a current basis. The bonds are also going to have interest only during that time frame until the project is fully finished. Once it's finished and placed in service, then we convert to permanent, fully amortizing debt service, and that's a 25-year repayment structure. And then when you look at the allocations based on the 44%, the 39%, and the 16%, you can see that Charlottesville, Nelson right in the middle at about $430,000 on a recurring basis, and then Albemarle's last there on the right-hand side. In the appendix, just to show you how this all works, the grant anticipation note, again, we're looking at about a $12,250,000 size. Then you look at the bonds, that's about $37 million. When it factors in all the what we'll call the bond issuance and the premium there, what we're really looking at is the project fund down the bottom, and then the band takeout, the permanent financing of that band. The sum of those two line items total up to about the 49.3. So that's fully funding that project cost at that point. Then what you have are all the other local costs of issuance, the VRA costs, and also the cost to actually sell the bonds that VRA has to pay as well. And that is my presentation, plan of finance update, in anticipation of your consideration of the resolutions.
Thank you. Let's see if we have any questions for you, okay?
I think we've done something similar in the past, haven't we?
Yes, you have.
Okay. Mr. Chair,
Yes,
when you're prepared for a motion, unless anybody has any questions.
Go for it.
looks like you're up.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve Resolution R 2025-51 as presented.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay,
Is that the only motion we have to make on this?
I believe it is. Okay. Okay, if there's no further discussion, we'll do a roll call.
Dr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Crum?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Coombs. Thank you,
Thank you all very much.
Colonel. And
we
Godspeed.
We're, this will be the only month in like 5 months where we don't have an extra meeting.
Oh.
I'm ready to adjourn when you are.
I don't think we have any other business, so.
Mr. Chair, I move we adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Okay. Okay. Full roll call?
Dr. Leggett?
Yes.
Mr. Park?
Yes.
Mr. Rutherford?
Yes,
Mr. Reed?
Yes.
I thought about it.
Thank you.